Sorry, Noritz, we still can't hear you. Welcome to the CHAOSS App Ecosystem Working Group. Today is July 13, 2020. Notes, agenda. Shri and I put together a slide deck that I'm happy to share for a conference, for the GNOME conference. GUADEC, is that how you abbreviate it?
Yeah.
So I'm just activating link share so that you can view the slides. So if you want to have a look, feel free to take a look at the presentation. Any other updates from you all?
Did you end up submitting one for Academy as well, Jörg?
I did not submit. I think Shri submitted.
Maybe Shri, okay. Because I think he should have received a yes or no over the weekend. So I'll ask him.
Oh, yeah. If it was this weekend, I last talked with him on Friday, so I wouldn't know.
Okay, trying again. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Thank you. Finally.
Nice.
Everybody?
Good to hear you. Shri is also here.
I know. I'm sorry. I have contractors outside, so they're building a deck. So I had to talk to them. They came just at the time of the start of this meeting.
Well, you're coming right on time because we were just talking about the GUADEC slide deck. I just shared that with the group.
Yay!
And Neil also said KDE Academy should have sent out acceptances. Did you get anything?
I don't know. Let me check.
You did submit, right?
What is it?
You did submit to the KDE Academy.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Just searching.
I have a question. If we have input and or just questions about the deck, what's the best way to surface those?
I'll just activate that you can leave comments.
Okay.
So if you reload your browser, you should be able to make comments directly on the slides.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And then I will get a notification via email, and then we'll address those. And yeah, should all be good.
I'd be interested to hear how the both of you feel like it went or was received. I mean, I know it was an online thing, and maybe it's harder to. You can't really gauge an audience. I don't know. Online conferences are brand new territory for all of us, but.
You mean for the GUADEC?
Oh, is this not presented yet? Is this
not
upcoming?
Yet. It's next Monday.
Oh, shoot.
Oh,
okay.
Next Wednesday.
Well then, I'll be interested at our next meeting of this sort to hear how you think it goes.
All right. We will update you. So let's see. The thing we wanted to then work on today is adding metrics and data for the goal question metrics approach for the event organizer. So to recap what we did, we went through the exercise of defining goals, and we defined the personas that have those goals, then we matched the goals to the personas, and we decided to then deep dive into the event activity organizers. To then define what the specific questions is they have and what metrics we can use to answer those questions. So that's where we are at today. Did I skip anything? Does any of this not make sense? Okay, then I'm going to just share the document that we're working on today in the chat. It feels good to get to the stage where we're gonna actually talk about metrics and data. So if we go to this document, event organizers have the goal to retain contributors. And one of the questions they have is, how do people at an event feel about the project? And we already said that we can count emojis, positive and negative, as a way to gauge sentiment. And I just thought of adding data. And this could be a conference Slack channel, for example.
What do you mean? Like we would post emojis there?
So if an event has a Slack channel, then we can count in that Slack channel the emojis that participants post. And depending on whether they are posting smileys or frowny faces, we can then gauge what the sentiment is.
Well, but I don't know that that's about the conference itself. Like it could be a specific topic or something like that. When I thought of this, I thought it was more of like how in airports you walk past a certain checkpoint and you just press a button, like my experience today was good or my experience was bad, or, you know, like with emojis. Because also somebody may be an emojer, I don't know, like they might use 50 million emojis and then your data skews towards this person who is very emotive.
Okay, so I changed the data. I'm very glad we talked about this because I misunderstood what was written here. And so the way I formulated it now is ask participants to submit an emoji response to the question how they felt about the project. So
yeah, and just the thing, I noticed that I think OSS Summit or some conference that I recently went to had something like this, but they did it about every single talk. And I personally didn't do it because it seemed like a little bit overwhelming. I think that in my experience, I was much more likely to just do like an overall conference thing. But do others have other experience, or is there anything else like to the granularity that we want to do with this?
I think the Linux Foundation was sent out the email afterwards with, here was your schedule. How was it? And then 3 smiley faces. So we don't have to decide everything on the implementation right now. What our goal is, and you can correct me if you have a different opinion, to put together some resource that event organizers can use. And so if event organizers are like, I wonder how the people at our event feel about our project. How do I go about measuring this? Then we provide an answer. There may be other answers. There may be more ways of doing it. But at least they have a starting point. And then as we get feedback from others, we can improve our resource.
Makes sense.
So to make the most of our time, it's always limiting if only one person writes or one person talks. I would like to suggest that we all jump in, and for goals 4, 6, and 8, we just choose a question and write a proposal for a metric. That way we can parallelize the work a little bit. And then we can talk through it, let's say after 5 minutes, and make sure we're all on the same page and clarify things.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
Looks like we did all of them.
Awesome. That went
Still
much
half
faster
reading,
than I
but all right.
thought. I love it though. We say go and suddenly the document.
I barely was able to find one before the original time.
I was stuck on like one, and now I'm still reading, but everybody else is filled in. So Go y'all. I have a question on events in general, and forgive me, I think I missed the last meeting. Maybe this was covered. Are we doing anything with distinguishing between types of events? I mean, like say large conferences versus smaller kind of hackfest things. They could have differences in, you know, the very first thing here, like retention after events. Or is that just something people can shoot? We're giving the metrics and they can choose to apply it to.
Yeah, I guess the metric would be the same, right? Independent of the type of event or the size of the event.
For sure.
This is a buffet. We're just setting out all the food, the metrics, and everyone can choose what they like or what they need. So shall we go through? We can start at the top, and maybe the person who wrote it can identify themselves and talk us through.
I contributed to it, but somebody else wrote the point A.
Okay,
that
so
was me. I didn't write it, and that might not have followed the formula here. It occurs to me on this, you need a metric for how long somebody stays with the community, some sort of retention metric, and maybe you already have that. You know, in GNOME, we have foundation membership, which has to be renewed every 2 years. So that might be a thing. You can correlate existing registration data with existing data on retention without collecting any additional data than what you already have, right?
yes.
I think that's great for core contributors, but a lot of people attend our conferences that don't get to membership.
That's a good point.
So I think that part of this is really understanding like newcomers. How do they participate? And so an idea that I had was using, this is the data, of if they become contributors and they use a platform like GitLab, I assume GitHub has something similar, but you can actually see their contribution timeline, and you can see like when they start, when they drop off, all that kind of stuff. So you can use that. And it's not just for engineers, it can be for people contributing to other aspects of the project.
I love it. So what shall we call this metric? Contribution timeline of contributors or contribution? I don't know.
I think so. That sounds good. Contribution timeline.
Time since first contribution for event attendees. So that way we say, okay, we're going to look at the attendees and we're going to look at our dashboards when they first contributed. And that is the time they have been in the community. And then I think, if I heard you correctly, you had a second metric, and that is when they drop off. So time since last time.
Yeah, and if you can get people to actually contribute at the conference, then you'll kind of see that as a starting point. And that's kind of cool. You can see newcomers. Maybe there's a way to automate, like tracking how many new people are on a certain day. I don't know.
So these are excellent. So we have how long do new people who attend events stay with the community? We have time of attendees membership length. And we can correlate the registrations for existing data on participation. For example, for GNOME Foundation membership, renewal. Correlate or cross-reference. Which word do we want to use when we take the list of attendees and relate it to something else?
Well, I was just thinking that this one almost brings in a new, like a different context to what I was going for, which is almost like, to me, answers the question of like, how do events help retain people? Because if they're members and they're going to events, maybe the event really helps them connect with the community and like be there. So that's different to me than the newcomer story. And I don't know if those are two separate questions or if they're the same. Do you know what I mean? Like they might be different enough to make two questions. I don't know.
I feel like there's an interesting question buried under this that we don't have the metrics to determine, which is, given a person who's relatively new to the community, who is not yet, for example, a GNOME Foundation member for GNOME, if they attend that event, how much more likely are they to become a member or to become a core contributor? And the only way to do that is to get the baseline of the relatively new community members who did not attend the event. Otherwise, you can't compare. And I don't know how to get that number at all. So
I love that. That's cool.
So I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I can think of an approach here, but go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say that that still kind of plays into that question of like the role of events in retaining people, which I think is a little bit different in some ways. What, this is, did you create a new question? Oh, cool.
Yeah, the second question. Yeah.
No, I'm not very good with statistics. I don't know what the actual mathematical thing is. But data-wise, what I was thinking is we need one baseline of how long people stay in the community. And then data 2 is how long do people stay in the community if they attended an event.
Yeah, and the data could come from either surveys, like community surveys of just saying like, did you attend an event? Or it could be also asking for like handles and seeing if like handles during registration, so that then you can compare those with like newcomers data. So you would have to have a separate report on all newcomers in the year or something like that, and then see if you can somehow reference those handles with handles that attended in-person conferences. I don't know if that made sense, but something like that.
Yes. I don't know if this is a t-test or what the statistical test is.
Yeah, I have no idea.
We need to bring mathematicians into the next calls.
I am technically a mathematician, but statistics is its own very specialized area within mathematics. So I know some.
Oh, no wonder you have Kai right behind you, Sean.
I actually have like 2 shelves full of math.
Yeah.
So, yeah. None of them are statistics. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there we need something like survival analysis.
Survival analysis.
That
It
sounds,
shows. It shows. Yeah.
yeah.
It shows. Yeah. It shows. 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 It shows.
Go ahead, Armstrong. Survival analysis. What is that?
We just have to, it starts like from 100%, then over time, you see the rate of survival. It's a probability, like let's say on the y-axis, and then the activities will show on the like the number of weeks or the duration in time will be on the x-axis. But that kind of analysis, we use the survival analysis, within which we also have some tests to see the, for example, if we are comparing more than one person to multiple people, we do a post hoc test also to compare the similarities in activities.
I like it. I would just capture it as an idea in here and move on, and we can talk about the implementation details later. Because if we go too deep in one metric, we don't get far. We can also have here compare for the membership one. If we go back to question 1, we could also compare membership length for attendees versus non-attendees. How are we all doing on question 1 in the metrics? I'll take a silent as we're all good and we fully understand the metrics and the data, and we can move on. We already talked about question 2 for a while, so let's go to question 3. What is the level of contribution of people over time before or after attending event? And this sounds similar to the metrics we had with first contribution before and after an event, last contribution, but this time it's number of contributions.
That is hard to do since we're so prejudiced. I guess maybe prejudice is the wrong word, but most of the time we collect around development versus the soft skills. I don't know how other people do it. So a lot of times they use badges. I'm sorry, I'm getting into implementation details, but it just that needs to be kind of discussed at some point.
I also, so before and after attending an event, like right before people travel, right after people travel, so like around an event might not be the actual time we want to measure this. I wonder if this question is more so the same question as one of the ones we've already asked, which is what role does events play in engaging people over time, something like that, because I don't totally understand how you would, like, even if you're a core contributor, you know, there are going to be dips in your level of contribution.
I do think that we could, Shri has a good point. But I think that rather than looking at it as on an individual level, you can look at it on an aggregate level of saying, you know, do we see a spike in overall contribution, recognizing that some of the contributions aren't going to make it into our things that we measure, but we can measure what we can measure and see if we see a spike within that. And again, not digging down to did this individual or are there individuals that do it, just as a whole, did contribution spike after X event, Y event?
I guess I just, there are other events that might factor in of like, is it close to a release or is it, in the summer or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping those in mind is important.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, looking at an aggregate would maybe even out individual people's life events. Like I just have a weird contribution schedule. I pop in for a while, I pop out for a while. But yeah, there are certainly things that you would even see on the aggregate level. A release schedule is a very obvious one. But maybe trying to correlate your events, looking at both of those pieces of data could be interesting, and it might inform when you try to schedule your events to try to maximize where it is within a release cycle.
I love that.
Have really good data on that, Yeah.
I think too, if an event is hosting a specific hackathon or something, something especially for beginners, if they want, like if an event's making a concerted effort to, like if that's one of the goals of the conference is to increase contributions, then I think that it might be a little easier to track, because hopefully they would have some kind of mechanism in there that would assist them in that. So either like this one particular piece of, like we're having a doc-a-thon, like, everybody's working on docs. So hopefully they would be able to track that back. But I mean, we're making a lot of assumptions, about people's, the way they run events, but I don't know, just throwing that out there that maybe there's something in the metrics that we can encourage or something like that to help them realize that this is something that they should be tracking if that's a goal that they have.
Definitely. I love that. I think that's a really good thing to do, is like see if you can break it down into smaller pieces to track instead of having to do it as contributions to the whole project. Yep. Do we have that captured somewhere? Me.
I'm not entirely sure how to capture that. Maybe
Maybe it's a new metric, like contributions to a particular segment or something.
I'll have to go a bit earlier tonight, so bye everyone, and catch you in the next call.
Thanks for
You're in
joining us.
Mexico?
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a good one. Talk to you later, Neil.
I think the idea that Elizabeth mentioned about hackathon, it's a great idea, because a couple of let's say ecosystems are trying to do this. Even some projects are trying to work around hackathon to capture new contributors. But the thing is, how do we form a matrix to keep track? Because different people use different mechanisms. Yeah, so I think we could brainstorm on a way of capturing that kind of activities that we want here, but it's a great idea for what you mentioned. I like that idea.
Yep, love that. Okay, I just tried
Yeah.
to capture it. Awesome, great.
And we can remove the note. I think that's captured in the parentheses.
Okay.
Awesome. So I know we're moving fairly fast and it's not all fully nailed down, and that's okay. Next time we go over this, we'll be like, what were we thinking? And that's our first user test. So don't worry about getting it perfect. We'll iterate on this. Question 4, how do the people at an event feel about the project? We already talked about counting emojis.
I added the sentiment analysis about the event hashtags, because I know that event organizers always push those hashtags because they want to know too, if it's a company run event, all the marketing people want to know, like everybody who's paying for anything in that conference wants to know what the sentiment is. So I feel like people, I think, and I could be wrong, but I feel like attendees are used to seeing that. Like they don't have a problem adding those hashtags in. So I feel like there might be a pretty good body of data that could be run through some kind of sentiment analysis to figure out in real time how things are going.
How is the sentiment analysis carried out? Is that, yeah, on social media?
That's a great question. I know it's done. I don't know the, I think there are like algorithms that people have worked up that really look at, you know, the words that are being used. And I to be perfectly honest, I don't know the details, but I'm fairly certain those exist.
Cool. And I wonder if this fits into, but just even the number of tweets about it sort of gives you a baseline of, was this exciting? Was it, you know, engaging or not? So
yeah, for sure. Even if it's, I guess, even if it's terrible and people are like, you know, freaking out on Twitter, at least there's some data there that you would, you know, causing a stir in some regard. So yeah, I think that's a valid point. Just even the number, the flat out number of tweets that are associated with that.
oh, that merits a new question. Awesome.
And you know, that might also differ with online events, because like when you're at an event, like you're much more likely, you're sitting in a talk, you're much more likely to be like live tweeting it. But like online, I don't know. Georg, what was your feeling? Did you have an urge to tweet anything about the Open Source Summit last week or whenever?
I tried tweeting about it, but there was at the same time the Slack channel that was pulling me away, and I wanted to interact with the speaker directly in the platform. And so after live tweeting one or two talks, I was like, I'm giving this up. And honestly, I didn't see a lot of live tweeting going
I
on.
didn't either. And I know there was good engagement within the Slack channels, but I think people were, the difference between, I think, an online event and an event like this is that we are so focused on the online engagement, we're already online. And so when we're at a physical conference, there's a delimited, I mean, we're delimited, right? We are on social media and doing while we're at a talk. But here we're already in that space. So I don't feel like I want to tweet out because I'm already
Could
on.
an additional data point then maybe be in those instances how active your chat is? There might be a way to measure the activity on the quantity.
I agree. And it almost begs the question, should we be even looking at two completely different sets of metrics for an online event versus an in-person event? Because we would, I think, look at the data different ways depending on, and like you just said, I would imagine that those platforms that are being used have some way to track all of that stuff, like where people are coming from, you know, how many chats were in a particular talk, and just keep all of that data, because whoever's paying for that is going to want to see that too. So I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really good point, because the engagement was there just in a different way, in a different method. So
I like
although a lot of the free software applications like GNOME and KDE are both using Big Blue Button, and they probably don't have as detailed metrics from those software.
We generally don't have that kind of, yeah, we generally don't collect that kind of thing. And it's also a almost anti-metrics collection.
I know,
So,
we have to get creative.
which you know is par for the course for our free software project. So we have to thread lightly.
that's a good point. And maybe it just comes down to like Slack or Discord or whatever the, you know, chat of choice happens to be for that particular event.
I mean, if we had gateways, I'm sorry, again, in solution space, but if you're Slack had a gateway to Twitter, which you could just post on that channel and it gets put to Twitter automatically, then you would get a better Twitter thing. I mean, just because you're in the same spot.
So I feel like we have a really great thing going here, and I hate to break it up, but as the facilitator, I'm looking at the time and we are out of time.
Eating meetings.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your engagement. I feel like we made a huge progress today. And next time, I made a note here in the document. We're on question 6 to then continue working through this. And yeah, this is great.
I'd like to make one comment. I honestly, I feel like this is one of the most productive meetings I ever come to, because we actually move things forward, and compared to a lot of corporate meetings I'm at, I want to say like this is great stuff. Thank you, Joy, for being a facilitator. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You just got voted to do all of the meetings for everyone at every time.
Yeah.
So good job.
Oh, I couldn't. No, it's definitely a team effort. You're all great, a great team. So,
All right.
thank you very much. Any last comments before we leave?
Nope.
Well, then I wish you all a great rest of your week. See
Thank
in
you.
2.
See you.
You too.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.